So today we are making a personal size pizza. Now, this pizza measures 10 to 12 inches across, so there really is plenty to share, but you know, if you're really hungry, no judgment, you can eat the whole thing yourself. So pizza is truly my favorite food. So I have decided to declare January Pizza Month here on Small Batch Big Taste. And we're gonna be making different kinds of pizza all month. Today we are making a yeast crust based pizza. Next week we're gonna do a no yeast crust pizza so that if you're in a real hurry, this is the one for you. And then we're gonna do a thick crust Detroit style pizza. So stay tuned. Like I said, today we're doing a yeast-based crust. Now, this takes a little bit more time because you have to allow time for the dough to rise, but totally worth it. We're gonna start with a third of a cup of warm water. Now, I just get it right out of my tap. You want water that is about 105 to 110 degrees. If you're not sure what that is, use like a meat thermometer, candy thermometer to check the temperature. But it's a nice warm baby's bath kind of temperature. Getting the temperature right is important because if your water's too hot, you'll kill your yeast. If it's not warm enough, it won't activate the yeast and your dough won't rise. So I think we got it good here. We just need a third of a cup. All right. And then I'm gonna add in my yeast. Now I am using dry active yeast as opposed to a rapid rise yeast. The difference is dry active yeast needs to be proofed or it needs to be put in water to activate it. So we're gonna add in, and I believe that is a half a tablespoon of dry active yeast. I just checked my notes. It's a half a teaspoon of dry active yeast, okay? So half of a teaspoon. And then we're just gonna grab a spoon and just swish that a bit. And then we're gonna let this sit. We're gonna let it sit for 10 minutes or so until it gets kind of bubbly. I like to cover it to give it a little bit warmer environment. We're gonna set that aside. Now, if you're using a rapid rise yeast, which means it doesn't need to be activated in water, you can just throw it and your water right in with your flour and your other ingredients and mix up your dough. So while that is proofing, let's get started on our sauce. I am going to use a small to medium size saucepan. I'm going to add in a half of a tablespoon of olive oil and a half of a teaspoon of minced garlic. Then we're going to take this over the stove top and we're just going to saute that together until it's nice and warm and smells yummy. Add a half a tablespoon of olive oil and a half of a teaspoon of garlic into a small saucepan. Let it cook for a minute or two, and then add in a half of a cup of crushed tomatoes. Use the rest of the tomatoes in some chili or that small batch taco soup recipe of mine you can find up above. Add in a half a teaspoon of sugar or honey and a quarter teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Let it simmer for 5 to 10 minutes and stir occasionally. You want it to thicken up a bit. So while our sauce is cooling, you don't want to put it onto your pizza too hot. We're going to make our dough, and we are going to start with a cup of all-purpose flour. Now, I am using my stand mixer and with my hook attachment, which I need to go grab. All right, here it is. Now, you can totally do this by hand too if you don't have a stand mixer. It's just a little bit more work. So a cup of all-purpose flour, a quarter teaspoon of salt, a half of a tablespoon of olive oil, and then I am going to add in our yeast mixture, which is ready. All right, get it all in there. Then we're just gonna go ahead and knead it until our dough is nice and soft and smooth. Now, if your dough seems a little dry and all the flour is not incorporated, go ahead and add in just like a teaspoon more of water at a time. But you want all that flour incorporated and the dough to pull away from the sides of the bowl. And with these small batch recipes, because the bowl is so big on the stand mixer, you may need to take a spatula and kind of help it along a little bit to get all of that dough down into the bottom of the bowl. All right, mine is a little dry. All that flour is not quite incorporating. I'm gonna add in just a little bit of water. There's a lot of things that can affect this, your weather, the flour you're using, but just a little bit at a time so you don't get too wet of a dough. So I just let the dough knead for maybe 4 to 5 minutes so it's nice and soft and smooth. Now it'll be slightly what I call tacky, but not sticky. So it just shouldn't stick to your hands, okay? And after I pull it out of the mixer, I would just like to give it a couple kneads by hand. If you're doing this by hand, I like to use the palm of my hand to push it forward, bring it back, push it forward, bring it back. And that's just how I like to do it. All right, now we're gonna take a bowl because now comes the rise time. And into the bowl, I'm gonna add just a little bit of olive oil, just kind of enough to coat the bottom. take my dough and I like to rub it in the olive oil and then flip it over so the olive oil is on top. Then we're gonna take a towel, and these are my favorite kitchen towels. I still have my Christmas ones out. These are my geometry towels. They are the best kitchen towels I've ever used. It's all I use. There's a link to them down below if you need to get yourself some new kitchen towels. Then we're gonna cover this and we're gonna let it sit for about 30 minutes. Now, if you need to kind of speed along a little bit or your house isn't really warm, it's snowing here today in Utah, so it's a little chilly, I like to turn the light on in my oven and I don't turn the heat on, just turn the light on, and that just gives the oven enough warmth to kind of help the dough along, help it rise a little faster, especially if my house is cold. Our dough has risen for about 30 minutes. It hasn't quite doubled in size, but that's totally okay. We're gonna add just a little bit of flour to our surface and take that dough out. And the next step is we're going to roll out our dough. Now I'm gonna roll mine out into about a 10 to 12 inch circle. You can make your pizza square if you have like a baking dish you wanna use. A trick to hopefully get our pizza as round as possible is I roll and then I rotate a quarter of a turn. I roll again, rotate a quarter of a turn. And it just helps to get a more even round shape. Although, you know what? The pizza's gonna taste the same whether it's round or square or lopsided. So just roll it out till a 10 to 12 inch square. It depends on how thick or thin you like your pizza crust. I like mine fairly thin, so I might make mine a little bit bigger, more like 12 inches. All right, it's fairly round. Good enough. I'm gonna use a cookie sheet. Now, if you have a pizza stone, go ahead and use that. It's gonna get you a little crisper of a crust on the bottom if you use a pizza stone. And then I just take my hand and just rub some olive oil on to the bottom of the cookie sheet. Make sure you kind of cover the whole area where the crust is gonna be. All right, we're gonna take our pizza crust, plop it on there, and then if you want a little like a rim, a thicker edge of the crust, you can go ahead and, form that on your dough. I don't particularly care or need that, so I'm just gonna leave mine flat. Let me grab a towel, get this oil off of my hands. All right, now it's time for your toppings. But first, we're gonna add our sauce. And there's about enough sauce here just for perfect amount for our pizza. I don't like a real heavy sauce on my pizza. Oh, I'm gonna spread that around. Now, of course, you could always use, jarred pizza sauce if you would rather, but then on a small batch pizza, you end up, with a lot of sauce left over, which you can always freeze too. I like things like that, we'll put them into ice cube trays and freeze them like that, and then I can just pull out 1 or 2 ice cube sizes of the pizza sauce to use next time I have a pizza craving, which is quite often at our house. All right, there we go. We got our sauce on there. Not perfectly even, but hey. Now you have to decide what toppings you want. We are pepperoni fans at our house, so I'm going to, first of all, you have to decide, I'm curious, do you put your pepperoni on first, then your cheese, or your cheese first, then your pepperoni? I don't think it really matters. But I'm gonna put my cheese on first. I'm using shredded mozzarella cheese. I'm probably gonna use about 3/4, 2/3 of a cup. Then I'm gonna add on my pepperoni, and I'm curious to know what your favorite pizza toppings are. Let me know in the comment down below. And then after I've got my pepperoni on, I'm gonna sprinkle just lightly a little bit more cheese over the top. And I also like to add a little bit of shredded Parmesan cheese in with mine. And then it's ready for the oven. And we're gonna bake this in a 400-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes until the crust is turning golden brown, the cheese is melted and just starting to get brown and bubbly. So my pizza cooked for about 14 minutes. You wanna make sure that it's nice and golden brown. You see that underneath. I'm gonna put it onto a cutting board, and then you have to make one last decision. How are you gonna cut your pizza? Now, I grew up in Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, they cut their pizza into squares. Then I moved out west, and I discovered they cut their pizza into pie shape. So, which do you prefer? Anyway, either way, it's gonna taste delicious. So stay tuned this month for Pizza Month. Next week, we'll be doing a no yeast crust. Be sure to check out some of my other main dish recipe videos down below, and I'll see you in the next video.